the Department of Environment is turning the spotlight on the national bird, the Cayman Parrot. Those at the department say while the population of the endemic bird is steadily on the rise, there are still a number of threats that could stymie the progress that has been made. Joining me now to discuss those threats is DOE Research Officer Jane Haakonsson. Good evening and thank you for being here with us on Cayman 27 News.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with the Cayman Parrot population. Where are we now and how have your efforts led to where we are in those numbers?
Okay, so we started looking at the numbers of the Cayman Parrot back in 2005, and we did so obviously because of what happened with Hurricane Ivan. So unfortunately we don't have a comparative from before the hurricane, but we only have, what happened after and how many birds did we have afterwards. And then we've continued that population monitoring every other year because of course we have a Cayman brack population also that we want to monitor. So we monitor them on and off, so every other year for each of the two islands, and they have come back, as you say, very slowly, very similar to Paloma. So Paloma in 2008, we actually managed to look at the population before and after, and so on Cayman brack, we lost at least 50% of the birds there.
And how many on Grand Cayman after Ivan?
So after Ivan there was about 2,000 birds left. 2,000 birds
and
on Grand Cayman.
And we were what, about 50% less or even?
So we're thinking that that's probably about 50% now too, but as I say, we didn't have an estimate just before Ivan.
So where are we now?
So now we're at a population of around, and I'm really worried about saying these numbers because they sound quite nice, but we're around 6,000 on Grand Cayman. The problem with this is that it's not a numbers game per se. So while that sounds like a lot, we have very few breeding pairs. So small island populations of parrots have very large percentage of floaters. So they're mature animals that just don't breed. And they may not breed because resources are limited, so things like nesting sites as well as foraging areas. And so therefore, also, when we lose habitat, we still see birds come in, or we still see quite a few birds, but they're non-breeding birds, so...
That's right. You're bringing me to my next question, which is about the 50% of parrots are breeding.
Right.
And so you're saying this is because of the development issues, maybe poaching, and you're calling them floaters, the birds who are not breeding?
That's right. So it's actually a natural phenomenon in parrot populations. They do have a high percentage of non-breeding birds, but that's exacerbated if you have outside pressures on the population. And 50% is probably a high estimate. Sometimes it can be only 20 or 30% that are actually breeding.
When we talk about development, how do we strike that balance? Because we do have to develop as a country, and that's infrastructure and the like, but how do we ensure that we are looking after those nesting areas?
Right, it's a really good question because it's something that we're dealing with on all three islands with multiple species. So the rock iguanas in your back garden in Little Cayman, but also of course your parrots. So because we do have to live together and the islands are small and we have very finite natural resources left, one of the things that you can do is ensure that you have natural landscaping with native trees and plants generally speaking.
So you're speaking to those of us who have our backyards. We can make sure we have the right flora up for the birds in order for them to thrive.
Correct. And if you are considering developing a piece of land, try and maintain as much of the natural, especially the big older trees. We don't have a lot of them. We don't have a lot of ground soil, so our trees tend to be stunted in growth. And parrots are cavity nesters, which means they don't build a little nice nest that you see a banana quit do, but instead they go in and need a hollow burrow, so they can use that of a woodpecker's or something else. They can take over other animals' nests, but they need a bigger trunk in order to nest.
And let me ask you about another topic which might be seen as controversial, poaching.
Right.
When we say poaching, what exactly do we mean? Do we mean killing the birds because they might be seen as a nuisance? We know that farmers sometimes have difficulty with the parrot because their crops are being eaten, or are people also capturing the birds?
Well, it's a sort of double-edged sword. People either hate them so much they want to get rid of them, or love them so much they want to take them into their houses. So it's a really difficult and very, as you say, controversial topic. I have all the sympathy in the world with people that are trying to live on mangoes and having them destroyed by parrots. Parrots are getting increasingly clumped because their natural range is going down, so they're becoming more and more narrow range. So they are eating what they can find out there, which is why I encourage people to keep things like sea grape and birch berries and everything else, because they really are generalist feeders, and they can feed on a great variety of things if it's there still.
Ah, so sea grapes. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they love it.
Okay, so we addressed the poaching, we addressed the development. So other than making sure we have those lovely big trees for them to nest, anything else that we can do as a population?
I think especially after big storms and that sort of thing. For example, on Paloma, one thing that the department and the community on Cayman Brac was very actively involved in was providing the surviving birds with food that was readily available, fresh water, etc. I mean, a lot of the birds would sit on the ground and probably would have starved because a lot of their natural browse obviously disappears after a hurricane. So if there is a big storm and you see a bird in need, you know, do your bit for the national bird.
All right, thank you so much for being here with us on Cayman 27 News.